You and your pack of bastards, get out! You walk away with nothing!
Actually, sir, she just inherited everything. Your late father-in-law left her his entire estate.
The day Marcus Bennett moved his mistress into the master bedroom, he knelt in front of his 3 children, looked them each in the eye, and said, "Your mother abandoned you." His 7-month pregnant wife was 200 miles away, holding her dying father's hand. She had no idea her locks had been changed. She had no idea another woman was sleeping in her bed. And she had absolutely no idea that in 72 hours she would become one of the wealthiest women in America. What Marcus did not know, what nobody in that house knew, was that Claire's father was Richard Ashford. The Richard Ashford, $30 billion in real estate, holdings, and trusts. And every single share, every property, every cent of that empire had just been signed over to one name, his daughter. The same woman Marcus had just erased from her own home. The same woman whose grandmother's quilt was sitting in a trash bag in the garage. The same woman whose 11-year-old son was hiding under his bed, writing down the growth chart measurements before the mistress painted over them. But here is what makes this story different from every revenge story you have ever heard. Claire did not scream. She did not call. She did not beg to come home. She buried her father. She read every document. She met with every lawyer. And then she walked into a room of 600 of the most powerful people in America, stepped up to a podium, and watched her husband's face as he realized, for the first time, who he had thrown away. And what she did next is something he will never recover from. This story will take you through 3 moments where Claire was pushed to absolute rock bottom, 2 moments where she thought she had won only to lose everything again, and one final scene that will make you want to stand up and applaud. Stay with me. Every word of this earns its place. Lesson and value statement. Here's the truth this story will teach you. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. And the most powerful woman in any room is not the one who speaks the loudest. She is the one who waits until her words have teeth. If you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or erased by someone who should have known your worth, this story is for you. If this story hits home for you, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what comes next. Leave a comment and tell me, at what moment did you realize Marcus had already lost everything? Was it the locks? The quilt? The speech? I read every single comment, and your answers always surprise me. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are still here at the end, you will understand why the quiet river always cuts the deepest. I will see you in the next one. The day Marcus Bennett moved his mistress into their home, he knelt in front of his 3 children and told them their mother had abandoned them. He believed every word he said. He had been rehearsing it in the bathroom mirror for 3 days, adjusting his tone, softening his eyes, perfecting the particular expression of a man who wants to appear heartbroken while feeling absolutely nothing of the sort. And by the time he delivered that speech, in the living room of a house his wife had built with her own hands over 10 years, he had repeated it so many times that the lie had stopped feeling like a lie and had started feeling like memory. But 14 floors below, in the lobby of an office tower in Manhattan, 4 lawyers in dark suits were stepping into an elevator. They carried leather briefcases. They spoke to no one. And they were holding documents that would dismantle Marcus Bennett's entire life before dinner. But this story does not start in that lobby. It does not start with lawyers or documents or the quiet machinery of consequence. It starts 11 years earlier, with a woman who spent a decade making herself small for a man who never once noticed her actual size. If you think you know where this is going, stay with me, because you do not. The house on Willow Creek Lane in Charlotte, North Carolina, was Claire's doing from the first nail to the last curtain rod. She had chosen every color herself, warm gray in the hallways, white trim on every window. A farmhouse kitchen with butcher block countertops that she had sanded and sealed herself over a long weekend while Marcus was at a conference in Chicago. She picked the light fixtures from a salvage shop outside Asheville, drove 2 hours each way with Ethan strapped into his car seat in the back, and installed 3 of them herself before Marcus came home and asked why the dining room looked different. She had not expected him to notice. She installed the 4th one after he went to bed. The children's artwork hung in the hallway, not taped to the refrigerator the way most people did it, but framed, properly framed, in simple white frames she bought in bulk. Because Claire believed that when you frame a child's drawing, you are telling them that what they made has value, and children remember that. Ethan, age 7, had drawn a rocket ship with 6 engines and a flag on top that said Mom. Lily, age 5, had painted a garden of flowers taller than the house, in colors that did not exist in nature and were better for it. Baby Jack, age 2, had produced a purple circle with 2 dots that he insisted was a dog named Truck. Claire had written each child's name on the back of every drawing with a date and a small note about what they had told her the drawing meant. She was that kind of woman, the kind who paid attention to the things other people called small, because she understood that small things were almost never actually small. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like the state of North Carolina, was a grocery list in her handwriting, organized by aisle. Her reading glasses were folded on the nightstand beside a half-finished novel, still open to page 204, because she had not yet had time to finish it. Her slippers sat at the foot of the bed, perfectly aligned, the way she left them every morning, without thinking, and on the kitchen windowsill, in a small frame that had been there so long it had become invisible to everyone except her, was a quote handwritten on an index card. A woman who can endure small discomfort will survive a large one. Her grandmother had said that to her when she was 9 years old, standing in the kitchen of a lake house in Vermont, learning to make pie crust with cold hands because the butter had to stay cold, and that meant your fingers did too. Claire had written it down that same night in a notebook she kept beside her bed, and she had carried those words forward through every difficult year that followed the way some women carry prayers. The house smelled like her, like vanilla and clean laundry and something warm that visitors could never quite name. It smelled like a home that had been lived in and loved and tended to by hands that actually cared. And none of that, none of the warmth, none of the 10 years of a woman pouring herself into 4 walls and the people inside them, none of it stopped what was about to come through the front door. Here is something worth knowing, and you can write this down if you want. The first sign that something is wrong in a marriage is never the big thing. It is the small thing you explain away. The dinner he is late to, the phone he turns face down on the table, the kiss that used to land on your lips and now lands on your forehead. Pay attention to the small things. They are trying to tell you something your heart is not yet ready to hear. Claire had 3 children. Ethan was 11, tall for his age, with his mother's steady brown eyes and a watchfulness that made adults slightly uncomfortable when they forgot he was in the room. He read books meant for people twice his age. He remembered everything, and he said less than he knew. Claire called him her old soul, and she meant it as the highest compliment she could give, because she had been one herself. Lily was 8, gentle, artistic, emotionally tuned to frequencies that most adults could not hear. She drew birds constantly in a notebook Claire had bought her, titled Lily's Bird Book, on the cover, in Lily's own handwriting. She cried when adults argued, even quietly, even in the next room with the door closed, because Lily could feel tension the way some people feel weather. And baby Jack was 3 years old and operated at a level of joyful destruction that Claire found both exhausting and deeply entertaining. He ate crayons. He once called the mailman Daddy in front of 4 neighbors, and Claire had to explain to Margaret Henderson across the street that no, the mailman was not Jack's father. Jack simply called every adult male Daddy, including the cashier at the grocery store and once memorably, a mannequin at the department store. He loved his mother with the fierce, physical, non-negotiable devotion of a toddler who has not yet learned that love is supposed to be complicated. Claire was 7 months pregnant. She moved through the house with one hand resting on her belly, talking to the baby softly when she thought no one could hear. She told the baby about the weather, about what she was cooking for dinner, about how Lily had drawn a cardinal that morning that was actually quite good. Ethan heard her once, standing in the hallway outside the kitchen, listening to his mother talk to someone who could not yet answer. He said nothing. He just stood there with something old and sad in his 11-year-old eyes, and then he walked away. Claire met Marcus Bennett at a college reunion event in Boston on a rainy Thursday evening in October. He was charming in the effortless way certain men are charming, like they were born knowing how to make a room feel warmer just by standing in it. He had a wide, easy smile and a way of listening that made you feel like you were the most interesting person in any space. He was hungry and funny and ambitious in a way that felt exciting when you were falling for someone, and Claire was falling for him before the second drink was finished. When they were alone together, away from rooms and crowds and the need to perform, he was soft with her, unexpectedly tender. He brushed her hair behind her ear when she talked. He remembered what she ordered the second time they had dinner, without asking. He laughed at things she said that other people had never found funny, which is the most dangerous form of seduction there is, because it makes you feel understood. She fell in love with all of it. The way people fall in love when they are young enough and hopeful enough to believe that what they see in the beginning is what will always be there. What Marcus did not know, what Claire chose not to tell him, was that her father was Richard Ashford. If you followed American business in the last 30 years, you knew that name. Forbes had once called him the quietest titan in American real estate. He had built his empire slowly, deliberately, deal by deal, and block by block, over 3 decades of discipline and patience and a refusal to cut corners that had cost him opportunities in the short term and made him untouchable in the long one. Richard Ashford was worth more than most people would ever be able to count. But Claire had grown up differently than you might expect. Her mother had died when Claire was 6, and her grandmother Helen had raised her in a lake house in Vermont, not in the Greenwich estate with its gates and security detail. In a 4-bedroom house on a quiet lake where the nearest neighbor was a retired schoolteacher named Dorothy who brought pie on Sundays and called Claire Chickadee. Helen Ashford believed that wealth without character was a curse that looked like a blessing until it was too late. She told Claire once, standing at the kitchen counter kneading bread dough with strong, weathered hands, "Money you did not earn will either make you lazy or make you a target. Earn your own first. Then you will know the difference between people who love you and people who love your last name." Claire had taken that sentence and placed it somewhere deep inside herself, in the same place where she kept her grandmother's pie crust recipe and the memory of how the lake looked at sunrise in October, and she had not removed it since. She told Marcus her father was in real estate. She introduced Richard at a quiet lunch before the wedding. Richard Ashford sat across from Marcus Bennett for exactly 1 hour, drank 1 cup of coffee, asked 4 questions, and said almost nothing else. He flew back to Greenwich that evening. That night, while Claire was washing dishes, her father stood in the kitchen doorway and said quietly, without drama, without accusation, as a simple and careful observation, "He loves how you make him feel. Make sure he also loves who you are when you are not making him feel anything at all." Claire nodded because she thought she understood. She would spend the next 11 years learning that her father had seen something in that 1 hour that she had not yet been able to see in years. Their early years were good, full and warm and sweet in the way early years are, when everything still feels like possibility, and you are building something together, and the future is a place you are walking toward side by side. Claire grew a small consulting practice from nothing. Client by careful client. She raised Kofi, then Lily, then Jack. She made their house into a home. She was happy. Or she was happy, and Marcus was comfortable, and she did not yet know those were different things. The shift started in year 7. Marcus got promoted, started working later. Normal. Year 8, he began criticizing small things, the way she dressed. "You used to try harder," the way she parented. "You are too soft on Ethan." Year 9, he stopped reaching for her at night. She reached for him instead, and he said he was tired, always tired. The kind of tired that had nothing to do with sleep, and everything to do with where his attention had gone. Year 10, Claire found out she was pregnant with their 4th child. She told Marcus over dinner, nervous and hopeful in a way she had not felt since their first year together. His reaction was a pause. Then, "Okay." Not happy, not angry, just nothing. The particular nothing of a man who has already begun building his exit in his head and does not yet realize that everyone around him can see the scaffolding. Vanessa Cole arrived at Marcus's firm 14 months before the Sunday that changed everything. She was 31 years old, a junior partner, precise and polished and surgically skilled at one particular thing, which was identifying men who had remarkable women at home and had begun to take them for granted. She did not seduce Marcus. That is not how women like Vanessa operate. She listened. She asked him questions about himself that Claire had stopped asking years ago, not because Claire did not care, but because Claire already knew the answers. Vanessa made the old answers feel new. She said things like, "Your wife is lucky. I hope she knows that." And, "You seem like the kind of man who gives more than he gets." And eventually, the one that landed hardest, "I just think you deserve someone who matches your energy." And Marcus, who had a remarkable woman at home making his children's lunches and building his life and growing his 4th child inside her body, heard those words and believed them, because the most dangerous lie is the one that tells you exactly what you want to hear. And then there was Diane, Marcus's mother. She had been waiting a decade for this window, and she poured herself through it, like water through a crack in a dam. Diane had never accepted Claire, not from the beginning, not because Claire had done anything wrong, but because Claire was not the woman Diane had imagined for her son. Claire was too independent, too quiet in a way that suggested depth rather than submission, too comfortable with her own judgment. Diane needed a daughter-in-law she could shape. Claire had arrived already shaped by people far wiser than Diane, and she had remained that way, gracefully and without apology, and Diane had never forgiven her for it. She fed Marcus small complaints over Sunday dinners and late-night phone calls. That Claire seemed distant. That Claire was secretive about money. That Claire's real loyalty was to her own world rather than to this family. She said it softly. She said it consistently. She said it the way you plant something in soil and simply add water and wait. The night that broke something inside Claire was a Wednesday in March. She was standing at the kitchen sink finishing the dishes, 7 months pregnant. Her feet were swollen. Her back ached in the specific, constant way that only pregnant women understand. The kind of ache that is not sharp enough to complain about and not dull enough to ignore. The children were in bed. The house was quiet. Music played low from the small speaker on the windowsill. Something soft and acoustic that she had put on to make the kitchen feel less empty. Marcus's phone buzzed on the counter beside her. He had stepped outside to take the trash out, leaving it there, unlocked, face up. The screen lit before she could look away. A message from Vanessa. 4 words. She does not deserve you. And then a second message, right beneath it. Come over tonight. Claire set the phone down carefully. The way you set down something you are afraid of dropping, not because it is fragile, but because your hands have suddenly become unreliable. She did not pick it back up. She did not follow Marcus outside. She walked to the bathroom, turned the faucet on, gripped the edge of the sink with both hands, and looked at her own reflection in the mirror. 7 months pregnant, standing in a house she had built, reading a message from a woman she had never met who was telling her husband that she did not deserve him. She counted her breaths, 12 of them. She needed something to count, something she could control, because everything else had just become uncontrollable. 12 breaths. Then she dried her face, walked back to the kitchen, turned the music off, and finished making his tea. 1 sugar, no milk. Steep for 4 minutes. She set it on the counter for when he came inside. When Marcus walked back in and saw her standing at the counter, with the tea ready, and said nothing, she said nothing back. He took the tea, he went to the other room, and neither of them said another word that night. When you discover a betrayal, your first instinct is to confront, to scream, to demand answers right there in the kitchen with the dishes still wet. But here is what nobody tells you. The moment you confront without a plan, you hand all the power to the person who hurt you. They get to apologize. They get to deflect. They get to cry or deny or turn it around on you. And you get to stand there, holding the grenade they threw. If you can, and I know this is hard, wait. Not forever. Just long enough to make sure that when you finally speak, your words have teeth. In the weeks that followed, Claire grew quiet in a way that Marcus completely misread. He thought it was surrender. He thought she was pulling away from unhappiness, the normal kind. The kind that either drives people to fight or drives them to silence. He did not understand that this silence was different. She stopped initiating conversations he would cut short anyway. She stopped reaching for him at night. She began making more phone calls, always stepping out onto the back porch, always speaking quietly, her voice low and steady and entirely her own. Marcus watched her, pulling away, and felt relief. That relief, that quiet, uncomplicated, immediate relief, told Claire everything she had been afraid to know. When the person you love starts pulling away, you do not feel relieved. You feel terrified. Marcus felt relieved, which meant the marriage was already over in every way that mattered. She was simply the last one to agree to the terms. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Claire was in the kitchen, making Lily's lunch for the next day, humming something she had heard on the radio that morning. Her phone rang. The caller ID said Thomas Whitfield, and Claire's stomach dropped before her brain caught up. Because Thomas Whitfield was her father's attorney, and Thomas Whitfield did not call in the middle of a Tuesday unless something was terribly wrong. Richard Ashford had suffered a massive stroke at his estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. He had been found in his study, slumped in his chair, his reading glasses still on his face. Claire moved the way she always moved through difficulty. With quiet speed and complete focus. No energy wasted on anything that was not the next necessary step. She had her bag packed within the hour. She called the school about Ethan and Lily. She prepared 5 days of meals, labeled and stacked in the freezer. She wrote Marcus a note about Jack's pediatrician appointment on Thursday, already rescheduled twice, with the doctor's number and Jack's insurance card clipped to the front of the refrigerator. Before the taxi arrived, she stood in the living room where Marcus sat watching television and told him quietly and clearly what had happened, where she was going, how long she expected to be gone. She asked him to please make sure Jack got to that appointment. Marcus kissed her forehead, said he was sorry about her father, watched the taxi pull away from the window, with one hand resting on the curtain and the other already reaching for his phone. By the next morning, he had called a locksmith. He stood in his bathrobe, watching a man replace every lock on every exterior door, and he did not feel guilty about it. He had a story in his head by then, one that Vanessa had helped him build and Diane had helped him furnish. And in that story, Claire had chosen her father's world over this one, and he was simply responding to a choice she had already made. That is the thing about a man who has been slowly convinced by the wrong people that he is the victim. He starts to believe his own version so completely that it stops feeling like a lie and starts feeling like the truth. On that Sunday afternoon, Diane arrived first. She came through the front door carrying casserole dishes and the wide, comfortable smile that had never once warmed to Claire in 11 years. She set her dishes on the kitchen counter and began moving through the house the way she had always wanted to, opening cabinets, running her hand along countertops, standing in doorways with the satisfied expression of a woman who believed she was finally in charge. Greg arrived next, quiet and awkward as always, carrying boxes from a moving van parked on the street. He tripped over the front step, caught himself on the doorframe, and muttered something under his breath. Greg was not a bad man. That needs to be said plainly. He was a man who had let the habit of staying silent in the name of family loyalty become something he could no longer easily tell, apart from cowardice. And stepping out of that moving van, wearing a silk blouse the color of dark red wine, and carrying 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases like she had already earned the right to be here, was Vanessa. She walked straight through the front door, straight down the hallway, and straight into Claire's bedroom, where the sound of hangers sliding across the closet rod drifted back toward the living room like something being quietly erased. Marcus knelt in the center of the living room, Claire's living room, the one with the framed children's drawings and the grandmother's quilt visible through the bedroom door, and the growth chart penciled on the pantry doorframe. He looked at each of his children with the particular calm that only belongs to a man who has convinced himself completely that he is doing the right thing. "Your mother made a choice," he said. "She chose her father's world over this family. She is not coming back, but I am here, and I am not going anywhere." Diane nodded behind him like a deacon confirming a sermon. Greg looked at the floor and stayed very still. Baby Jack sat on Lily's hip because Lily had picked him up when the air in the room got heavy, the way she always did, as if she could shield him from things she herself did not yet understand. And Ethan, 11 years old, standing at the bottom of the stairs. He stared at his father for a long time. He did not cry. He did not speak. He just looked at him with those steady, measuring eyes and said absolutely nothing. Then he turned and walked upstairs and closed his bedroom door with the quiet, deliberate finality of a boy who had just learned something about his father that he would never unlearn. In Greenwich, Connecticut, in a private hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and the fresh flowers the nurses replaced every morning, Claire held her father's hand. Richard Ashford's breathing was shallow and uneven. His face was still in a way she had never seen on a man who had spent his whole life in motion, in boardrooms, on construction sites, walking the floors of buildings he had imagined before they existed. On the bedside table sat a sealed envelope. Claire's name, on the front, in her father's careful handwriting, the same handwriting that had signed every birthday card, every note slipped under her dormitory door in college, every letter she had kept in a wooden box in her closet for 20 years. She did not open it the first day. She talked to him instead. She told him about Ethan's science project, a model of the solar system made from painted styrofoam balls and wire hangers that had taken over the dining room table for 2 weeks. She told him about Lily's birds, how Lily had started drawing cardinals because she had seen one outside her window every morning and decided it was visiting specifically for her. She told him about Jack, about the mailman incident, and she thought she saw something flicker across her father's face that might have been amusement. She told him about the baby, how the baby kicked at 2 in the morning every night, like clockwork, like the baby had already decided to be punctual. She told him she was thinking of naming her Emma, after Grandma Helen's middle name. She told him small, warm, ordinary things, because she believed some part of him could still hear her, and because she was not yet ready for what was inside that envelope. Richard Ashford died on the 4th morning, peacefully in the soft gray light before sunrise, with his daughter's hand around his wrist and the sound of birds somewhere outside the window. Claire sat with him for a long time after he was gone. She did not cry yet. The crying would come later, alone, in a room with the lights off, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep it does not make sound at first. Then she opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things: a letter in her father's handwriting, a set of legal documents, and a smaller sealed envelope with Ethan's name on it, with a note that said, "When he is ready." The legal documents confirmed what Thomas Whitfield would explain in detail over the following days. Every share, every subsidiary, every holding company, every property, every trust, the entire architecture of the Ashford Empire, valued by international auditors at $30.2 billion, had been transferred into one name: Claire Ashford, his daughter, his only child, the woman who had never once asked him for anything more than his time and his presence, and the lessons he carried in his hands and his voice. Claire read the documents twice. Then she set them down on the bedside table and walked to the window and stood there looking at the sky above Greenwich, where the morning was coming in, pale and gold and indifferent to everything that had just changed. She did not fly home, not yet, because she had a father to bury, and because she was building something in the silence that no one on the other end of this story could see coming. Claire spent 2 weeks in Connecticut. She buried her father with the full ceremony. A man like Richard Ashford had earned 3 days of memorial, of people whose lives he had touched, arriving from around the country to say things about him that made Claire understand dimensions of her father she had never seen. She bets with every board member. She read every document in his study, sitting in his chair, at his desk, surrounded by his books and photographs. She asked every question twice when she needed to. She did not rush. She did not perform. She absorbed everything her father had built over 30 years, and she let it settle into her the way her grandmother's lessons had settled: deep, permanent, unshakable. She cried exactly once. The night before she was supposed to fly back to Charlotte, she sat alone in his study, with the lights low, and held her grandmother's ring between her palms, and looked at a framed photograph on the desk. Claire at her college graduation, cap slightly crooked, laughing at something her father had just whispered that no one else heard. Richard looking at her with the expression of a man looking at the thing he is most proud of in the world, not proud in the way that wants credit, proud in the deep, private way that simply cannot help itself. She held that photograph for a long time. Then she set it down, stood up, straightened her dress, and became, fully and without reservation, her father's daughter. But the reckoning did not come next, because before Claire Ashford would get her moment, she had to survive 3 things that would have broken anyone who was not built the way she was built. And the first one came at her father's memorial service. The public memorial was held at a cathedral in Manhattan. 600 guests, senators, Fortune 500 executives, old money families, media outside on the sidewalk. Claire stood at the front in black, 7 months pregnant, and delivered a eulogy about her father that was so quiet and so precise and so full of love that the room was still for a full 10 seconds after she finished. And then Diane Bennett walked in. She had flown in from Charlotte uninvited. She approached Claire afterward in front of a cluster of guests, carrying a sympathy card and wearing the expression of a woman who has practiced sincerity in the mirror. "I am so sorry for your loss, Claire," Diane said, loudly enough for every person nearby to hear. "Marcus wanted to be here, but he has been so overwhelmed taking care of the children alone. We all have been. It has been so hard since you left." The words landed exactly where Diane intended them to land, publicly, in front of people who did not know the full story, framing Claire as the absent mother, at her own father's memorial. Within hours, a blind item appeared on a society blog. Tech mogul's daughter, reportedly absent from family while grieving father. Sources say marriage in trouble. Claire's phone began buzzing. Friends, distant acquaintances, Marcus's colleagues, all asking if she was okay, all subtly implying she had abandoned her children. Meanwhile, back at Willow Creek Lane, Vanessa had redecorated the master bedroom. Claire's grandmother's quilt had been folded and placed in a garbage bag in the garage. Lily's bird drawings had been taken down from the hallway wall, and the growth chart on the pantry door frame, 10 years of pencil marks and dates and children's heights recorded in Claire's careful handwriting, had been painted over, just like that. A fresh coat of white paint over a decade of a mother's devotion. Ethan called Claire that night. His voice was flat, in the way that an 11-year-old's voice goes flat when he is working very hard to hold something together. "Mom, when are you coming home?" "Soon, baby, I promise." A pause. Then, she threw away Grandma's quilt. Claire closed her eyes. "I got it out of the trash. It is under my bed." Silence. A long one. "Mom, are you still there?" "I am here, baby. I am always here." Claire put the phone down. She sat on the edge of her father's bed, and she cried. Not the quiet kind. Not the kind where you wipe your eyes and keep moving. The ugly kind. The kind where your body shakes and you press a pillow over your face so no one in the next room hears you breaking. 7 months, pregnant. Father just buried. Children being told she abandoned them. Her home dismantled piece by a woman who had walked in carrying suitcases and started erasing her before the front door closed. There are moments when everything hits at once, grief and betrayal and helplessness all arriving at the same door at the same time. And the most dangerous thing you can do in that moment is make a permanent decision based on a temporary emotional state. Cry. Fall apart. Let it be ugly, but do not act until the storm passes. The storm always passes. Claire's storm passed at 3 in the morning. She washed her face, she called Thomas Whitfield, and she began to plan. She thought the worst was over. She was not even close. Claire's best friend, Sophie Parker, picked her up at the airport in Charlotte on a Thursday morning and talked for the entire 40-minute drive without taking a single breath. You have $30 billion, Claire. 30 to billion with a B. You could buy his entire firm and turn it into a parking lot. You could buy the parking lot next to it and build a statue of yourself. You could... Sophie, I am just saying, you have options now. Extremely expensive options. Claire almost smiled. Almost. She called Thomas Whitfield from Sophie's car. The estate transfer was complete. She had an army of lawyers, unlimited resources, and the full legal weight of the Ashford name behind every document. She told Sophie she was going home to get her children. Sophie said, "Go get your babies, and then we figure out the rest." Claire drove to Willow Creek Lane. Her key did not work because of course it did not. She rang the doorbell of her own home and stood on the porch she had painted herself 3 summers ago, 7 months pregnant, and waited. Marcus opened the door. Behind him stood Diane, arms crossed, expression arranged into something she probably thought looked concerned. Behind Diane, visible through the hallway, Vanessa sat on Claire's couch, drinking from Claire's favorite coffee mug with the particular comfort of a woman who has decided that everything in sight already belongs to her. Marcus held out an envelope. Inside was a temporary restraining order, filed by Marcus, claiming Claire had abandoned the family, claiming she was emotionally unstable due to grief, claiming she posed a risk to the children's well-being, supported by a sworn statement from Diane, claiming she had personally witnessed Claire in a state of emotional distress and erratic behavior. Claire could not enter her own home. She could not see her children. She stood on her own front porch, holding a legal document that told her she was not allowed to be where she was standing. The door began to close, and through the upstairs window, she saw Lily's face pressed against the glass. Lily mouthed one word, "Mommy." Claire pressed her hand flat against the air between them. Lily put her small hand on the glass. Then Diane's shape appeared behind the curtain, and the curtain closed. Claire drove to a hotel. She sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes before she could make herself get out of the car. She called Sophie, who answered on the first ring. "Where are you? What happened?" He filed a restraining order. "I cannot see my kids." A pause so loaded it could have sunk a ship. "Sophie? I am going to need you to repeat that very slowly because I know you did not just say what I think you said. I need you. I am on my way. Do not move. Do not call him. Do not do anything. I am bringing ice cream and rage." Sophie arrived into the hotel room 40 minutes later with 3 pints of ice cream, a legal pad, and a face that could have melted steel. She sat down on the bed, opened a pint, handed Claire a spoon, and said, "Okay, we are going to eat this entire pint, and then we are going to make a list of every person who wronged you, and then we are going to figure out how to legally destroy each one of them in alphabetical order. Diane is first because D comes before M and V, and also because I have wanted to destroy Diane since Thanksgiving 2019. Claire, despite everything, laughed. The kind of laugh that comes out before you can stop it, wet and shaky and real. Thomas Whitfield's team filed an emergency motion, but the family court system moved slowly, and the hearing was set for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks, 14 days without seeing her children. Ethan called from a phone at school during lunch. "Mom, Jack keeps asking for you. He sleeps with your sweater. Lily will not eat breakfast. I am trying, but I do not know what to do." "You do not have to do anything, baby. Just be their brother. I am coming. I promise you, I am coming." She threw away your book, the one on the nightstand. "I could not save that one." Pause. "But I saved the growth chart numbers, Mom. I wrote them all down before she painted over it. Every one, every birthday. I remember them all." Claire pressed the phone against her chest, closed her eyes, and breathed through it the way you breathe through labor. Controlled, deliberate, counting. If you ever find yourself in a custody situation, here is the most important thing I can tell you. Document everything. Every text message, every phone call, every interaction. Save it in 3 places: your phone, the cloud, and your attorney's office. The court does not care about your feelings, no matter how justified they are. The court cares about evidence. Be the person with the most evidence. The hearing came 2 weeks later. Thomas Whitfield's team dismantled Marcus's restraining order in 40 minutes. The judge was visibly unimpressed by Diane's sworn statement and noted that traveling to a dying parent's bedside is not abandonment by any legal definition. The restraining order was dissolved. Claire was granted temporary custody. She drove straight to the house. The children ran to her before she reached the front door. Baby Jack grabbed her legs and would not let go. Lily buried her face in Claire's shoulder and did not speak for a full minute. Ethan stood back, arms crossed, trying to be tough, until Claire opened one arm toward him, and he walked into it and stayed there. Marcus was ordered to vacate within 72 hours. Claire stood in her house that night holding her children and thought, "It is over. I have my kids. I have the estate. I will file for divorce, and this will be finished." But what Claire did not know yet was that the worst was still 48 hours away. The first blow came 2 days later. Claire collapsed in the kitchen. One moment she was pouring juice for Jack, and the next moment she was on the floor, the glass shattering beside her, juice spreading across the tiles she had picked out herself from a showroom in South End 4 years ago. Stress, exhaustion, dehydration. 7 months of carrying a baby through grief and betrayal and legal warfare without once stopping to take care of herself. Ethan called 911. He stayed on the phone with the dispatcher with a steadiness that no 11-year-old should have to possess, but that this particular 11-year-old did. He held Jack on his hip with one arm and kept Lily in the room with the other and told the operator, "My mom is pregnant and she fell down and she is not moving and I need someone to come right now, please." At the hospital, doctors stabilized Claire and the baby but put her on strict bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. She could not drive. She could not attend hearings. She could barely walk to the bathroom without Sophie or a nurse hovering nearby. Marcus's attorney filed a motion within 24 hours arguing that Claire was physically incapable of caring for the children and requesting emergency custody be transferred back to Marcus. The second blow came the next morning. A Charlotte Business Journal published an article. Someone had leaked Claire's identity as the daughter and sole heir of Richard Ashford. The article was framed not as a triumph, but as a scandal. Local mother hid $30 billion fortune from husband for 11 years. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. Claire was no longer the sympathetic, abandoned wife. She was the lying billionaire's daughter who had deceived her husband. Comment sections turned vicious. Marcus went on a local podcast, booked by Vanessa, and performed the role of the bewildered, betrayed husband with the precision of a man who had finally found a stage that fit him. "I had no idea who her father was," he said, his voice cracking at exactly the right moments. "She kept that from me for our entire marriage. I do not even know who she really is. All I want is what is best for my kids." The third blow landed that same afternoon. Ethan was at school. A classmate showed him the article on a phone during lunch. The comment section was visible. People calling his mother a liar, a fraud, a rich girl who had played a con on her own husband. Ethan punched the kid, got suspended. When Claire called him from her hospital bed, his voice was different, not flat anymore, broken. "They are saying you lied to Dad. They are saying you are the bad guy. Everybody is saying it. Ethan, Listen to me. Did you lie? A long pause, the kind of pause that fills an entire room. I did not tell your father about Grandpa's money. That is true, but I did not lie about who I am. I am the same person who packed your lunch every morning and read to you every night, and then why does everybody think you are the bad guy? Claire had no answer that an 11-year-old could hold on to. She lay in that hospital bed after the call, staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly, where the baby was kicking, and for the first time in her life, she thought the words she had never allowed herself to think before. Maybe I cannot win this. This is the moment, the real bottom, not the restraining order, not the locked door, not the funeral ambush. This, lying in a hospital bed, unable to hold her children, watching the world decide she is the villain, hearing her firstborn son ask if she is a liar. This is where most people break. Claire Ashford did not break, but she came close enough to feel the edge beneath her feet. When the world turns against you, when someone else has written the story of who you are and everyone seems to believe it, your first instinct is to fight the narrative, to explain, to defend yourself publicly. Do not yet. Public opinion is a wave. It crashes and it recedes, but court documents are stone. Focus on the stone. Let the wave do what waves do. The truth is patient. It will wait for you. Claire could not move, so she planned. From her hospital bed, and then from the guest bedroom at Sophie's house, where she spent the final weeks of her pregnancy, she directed Thomas Whitfield and his legal team with the quiet precision of a woman who had learned from her grandmother that the most important work is the work nobody sees you doing. She ordered forensic accountants to trace Marcus's finances. They discovered he had been siphoning money from their joint account for 11 months, paying for Vanessa's car lease, her apartment deposit, weekend trips, dinners, and a piece of jewelry that Claire found the receipt for and said nothing about, because by then she was no longer collecting evidence for a confrontation. She was collecting evidence for a court. A private investigator documented Vanessa living in the house on Willow Creek Lane, sleeping in Claire's bed, driving Claire's car, wearing a necklace that had belonged to Claire's grandmother and that Vanessa had found in a jewelry box, on the dresser, and put on like it was costume jewelry at a department store. Digital forensics recovered deleted text messages between Marcus and Vanessa going back 14 months, including one from Marcus sent the day Claire left for her father's bedside. 4 words that told the entire story. She is gone. It is time. Sophie visited every day and made it her personal mission to make Claire laugh at least once. Sophie, reading through financial records on Claire's laptop. He spent $4,200 on a weekend trip to Hilton Head with Vanessa. 4,200. Claire, I have seen this woman's social media. She is not a $4,000 weekend. She is a Tuesday afternoon Groupon at absolute best. Sophie, please. I am just saying, if you are going to detonate your marriage, at least have standards. This is insulting on every level, including the financial one. Claire, despite everything, laughed. But the evidence that changed everything, the detail that transformed Claire's grief into something harder and sharper and absolutely final, came from the court-appointed family therapist. In her notes, the therapist documented that Jack, age 3, had begun calling Vanessa Mama. Not accidentally, not as a confused mistake. Marcus had been encouraging it, actively, deliberately, teaching his 3-year-old son to replace his mother while his mother was carrying his sister and fighting to get back to him. There is a particular kind of anger that lives below grief, below hurt, below even betrayal. It is the anger of a mother who discovers that someone has tried to erase her from her own children's memory. And it is the last kind of anger you will ever need, because once it arrives, it does not leave until the work is done. Claire delivered a healthy baby girl 3 weeks later. She named her Emma, after her grandmother Helen's middle name, in a hospital room with Duffy holding one hand and a photograph of her father propped on the bedside table. She recovered, she rested, and 8 weeks after Emma was born, she was ready. The Ashford Foundation's annual gala was scheduled at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. For the first time, it would be hosted by its new chairwoman, Claire Ashford. The guest list included 600 of the most powerful people in American business, philanthropy, and media. Claire personally ensured that an invitation went to Marcus's firm without her name attached. The gala materials referenced the Ashford Foundation, a name Marcus had seen on paperwork for years without ever once looking it up. Because Marcus Bennett was the kind of man who never once searched his wife's maiden name, Sophie, helping Claire get dressed the evening of the gala, stood behind her in the mirror and said, "You are about to walk into a room with 600 people and reveal to your soon-to-be ex-husband that you are worth $30 billion while he is standing there with the woman he replaced you with. This is the most expensive revenge in human history, and I am here for every second of it." Claire adjusted her earring. "It is not revenge. Girl, it is a little bit revenge, and that is okay. Revenge dressed up in grace is still grace. It just has really good lawyers." The Plaza Hotel ballroom was the kind of room that makes ordinary people feel small and powerful people feel at home. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light across tables set with white linen and arrangements of peonies and hydrangeas. A string quartet played near the entrance. Champagne circulated on silver trays, carried by waitstaff who moved through the crowd like water through stones. Present and silent and perfectly timed. Marcus arrived with Vanessa on his arm. He was confident, comfortable, wearing his best suit and the easy smile of a man who believes he belongs in every room he enters. He saw his firm's name on a donor table near the back and felt small, satisfying pulse of importance. Vanessa looked polished and precise beside him, surveying the room with the sharp, assessing eye of a woman, cataloging value. Diane was there too. Marcus had arranged her invitation through the firm. She sat near the front, champagne in hand, performing the particular graciousness of a woman who believes proximity to wealth is the same as possessing it. Greg was at the bar, nursing something dark and quiet, looking, as he often did, like he wanted to be anywhere else. The host stepped to the podium, a distinguished man in a tailored suit who had known Richard Ashford for 20 years. He spoke briefly but warmly about the foundation, about its mission, about the man who had built it over 3 decades, with the conviction that the most powerful thing a father could do was raise a daughter who did not need saving. And then he said, "It is my extraordinary honor to introduce the new chairwoman and chief executive officer of the Ashford Foundation and Ashford Global Holdings." The doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Claire wore ivory silk, custom tailored, not excessive, not performing, just completely and precisely herself, walking forward through a room that had gone absolutely silent before it rose to its feet. The applause came like a wave. It started near the front where people knew the name and understood the significance, and it rolled backward through the room, growing, until 600 people were standing. Senators, CEOs, legal titans, philanthropists, the assembled elite of American business, all recognizing, even those who had never seen her face before, that something significant was walking toward that stage. Marcus's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. Vanessa's smile faded, the way ice melts in warm water, slowly at first and then all at once, dissolving from the inside. Diane grabbed Greg's arm with both hands. Greg looked at the floor and whispered, I told you this was going to end badly. Claire stepped to the podium and looked out at the room. She did not look for Marcus. She did not need to. She spoke for 12 minutes, about her father, about legacy, about what it means to build something not for yourself, but for the people who come after you. She talked about her grandmother's lake house in Vermont, about cold hands making pie crust, about a quote on an index card that she had carried for 25 years. A woman who can endure small discomfort will survive a large one. She mentioned a quilt. She did not explain whose quilt or what had happened to it. She simply said, my grandmother made a quilt that has been in my family for 40 years. It was recently thrown away by someone who did not understand its value. My 11-year-old son pulled it out of the trash and hid it under his bed because he understood what it meant, even when the adults around him did not. She paused. The room was perfectly still. That is what legacy is. It is not the money. It is not the buildings. It is the thing your children rescue from the trash because you taught them it mattered. She never once looked in Marcus's direction. She did not need to. Everyone who knew the story, and by now everyone did, understood exactly what she was not saying, and the silence where his name should be was louder than any accusation. After the speech, after the applause finally settled, and the room returned to conversation, and the string quartet resumed, Marcus crossed the floor. He moved the way a man moves when he has finally understood that something enormous has slipped away and has not yet decided whether to beg or argue. He said her name. She turned, and 4 lawyers appeared beside her with the smooth, choreographed precision of people who had been waiting for exactly this moment and were ready for it in a way Marcus could not have imagined. Thomas Whitfield, silver-haired, impeccable, 31 years of practice in his bearing, extended an envelope. Marcus took it slowly. Inside were 5 documents. The first was a divorce filing, legally airtight, fully prepared. The second was a custody arrangement, full custody to Claire, supervised visitation for Marcus, filed and approved. The third was a financial forensics report documenting every dollar Marcus had taken from their joint accounts, every payment to Vanessa, every lie converted into a line item. The fourth was a formal property notice informing Marcus that the house on Willow Creek Lane, where he had changed the locks and moved his mistress into his wife's bedroom and told his children their mother had abandoned them, was registered as a property asset of the Ashford Foundation. It had been since the deed was signed 8 years ago, a quiet gift from a father who had spent 1 hour with Marcus over 1 cup of coffee and had seen enough to make absolutely sure his daughter had somewhere to stand if she ever needed to. Claire had never needed to mention it. Until now. Marcus had 30 days to vacate. The 5th was a cease and desist letter addressed to Vanessa Cole regarding the media leak, accompanied by a note from Thomas Whitfield that read, the Ashford Foundation's legal department employs 340 attorneys. I trust this matter can be resolved without engaging all of them. Marcus stood there, in his best suit in the Plaza Hotel ballroom, with 5 documents in his hands, and for the first time in 11 years of marriage, Marcus Bennett had absolutely nothing to say. Claire looked at him, not with anger, not with triumph, not even with grief, though the grief was real and was hers and would live quietly inside her for months, the way you carry something that was valuable before it broke. She looked at him the way you look at something that used to be yours and is no longer, A full, clear, final look. Then she turned and walked away, and the lawyers closed behind her the way water closes over a stone. And the room moved on. And Marcus stood there, understanding, for the first time, what his wife's silence had always meant. What comes next is not karma. Karma sounds like fate. This is consequence, and consequence is just math. Marcus lost the house. He spent 28 of his 30 days in denial, calling attorneys who confirmed the documents were real, calling Vanessa who stopped answering, calling Diane who had opinions but no solutions. He moved into a rented apartment across the city that felt like a waiting room because he had never in his life actually built a home. He had only lived in one someone else built around him, and without her, the math of who he was came out significantly smaller than he had believed. Vanessa's departure was efficient and unsentimental. No house, no money, no status. 340 lawyers on the other side. The math did not work. She packed her Louis Vuitton bags and left without a long explanation because women like Vanessa do not explain. They calculate. During the divorce proceedings, forensic investigators discovered that Vanessa had done this before. Twice. 2 other marriages, the same pattern. She was never in love with Marcus. She was running a playbook. And Greg, standing in the driveway watching Vanessa load her car, gave a small wave that she did not return. He whispered to himself, "Yeah, that tracks." Diane left a voicemail for Claire. 4 minutes long. She mentioned God and family and grandchildren and the critical importance of forgiveness. Claire listened to every word. Then she called Thomas Whitfield and made sure the custody documentation included detailed language about the role certain family members had played in systematic parental alienation. She did not return the call. Greg sent a text. Short. "I should have said something. I am sorry." Claire read it, sat with it for a while, did not respond, did not block his number either. Because Claire had never been a woman built for hatred. She was built for precision, and there is a significant difference between those two things. But the final discovery came from her father's papers. Among Richard Ashford's private documents, Claire found a letter dated 2 years before his death. In it, Richard explained that he had hired a private investigator after that one lunch with Marcus. The investigator's report identified Vanessa's involvement 11 months before Claire discovered the text message on the kitchen counter. Richard knew. He did not tell Claire. His letter explained why. "You are my daughter. You deserve to discover the truth yourself and decide what to do with it on your own terms. I will not take that from you, but I will make sure you have somewhere to stand when you do." The house, the foundation assets, the legal structures, all of it. A father's quiet, long-distance love letter to a daughter he trusted completely. Claire read the letter once, folded it carefully, placed it in the wooden box with all his other letters, and sat in silence for a very long time, a Saturday morning, 1 year later. The particular kind of Saturday that belongs to a person who has survived something that should have broken them and did not. Claire sits at the kitchen table in the house on Willow Creek Lane. The house has been quietly restored. Her grandmother's quilt is back on the bed. The growth chart is back on the pantry door frame, repenciled from the numbers Ethan wrote down. Every birthday, every measurement, every child, and one new entry at the bottom. Baby Emma, 6 months, 26 inches. Lily's bird drawings are back on the walls. New ones too, better ones. She has been taking art lessons. Claire finishes a video call with her board. Calm, decisive, precise. The quiet authority of a woman who has earned every inch of the chair she sits in. She closes the laptop, leans back, and lets out a long, slow breath. Jack runs in from the backyard carrying a flower he has ripped directly from the garden, roots and soil and all, holding it out to his mother with the expression of a man delivering something of extraordinary value. Claire looks at the flower, looks at him, and laughs. Not a polite laugh, not a careful one, a real laugh, full and unguarded, the kind that only belongs to people who have stopped performing and started actually living. Lily appears next, carrying Emma on her hip, the way she has seen her mother do it, already practicing being someone's safe place. Ethan comes last, leans in the doorframe, arms crossed, watching his mother and his siblings with something in his face that has loosened since the last time she looked at him this carefully. "You good, Mom?" Claire looks at her firstborn, her steady one. The boy who saved a quilt and memorized a growth chart and asked no questions that were not his to ask, who trusted her without needing a reason he could name. "I am better than good, baby. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." And the truth is, she always had been. She never raised her voice. She never fought for the house. She never tried to prove her worth to a man who should have already known it. She simply waited. And when the time came, she closed the door, quietly, the way she always did. That evening, putting the children to bed, Emma in the crib, Jack asleep with one shoe still on, Lily murmuring good night without opening her eyes. Claire stops at Ethan's door. He is reading. "Ethan? Yeah? Your grandfather left something for you. I was going to wait until you were older, but I think you are ready." She hands him a small wooden box. Inside, a letter from Richard Ashford and a check. The memo line reads, "For the boy who saved the quilt." Ethan reads the letter. We do not hear all of it, but we hear the last line. "Take care of your mother, not because she needs it, she does not, but because the people we love deserve to know they are loved. And sometimes the strongest people are the last ones to hear it." Ethan folds the letter, looks at his mother, nods once. The exact nod of a boy who has just understood something important about the kind of man he wants to become. Claire touches his head, turns off the light, and walks down the hallway of a house that smells like home again. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments, when did you realize Marcus had already lost everything? I will see you in the next one. Closing disclaimer, this content was fully researched, developed, written, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real emotional depth and life lessons. Every character, every scene, and every word was carefully crafted to entertain, inspire, and remind you that your worth is never determined by the people who fail to see it. Thank you for listening.